Today, Janet and John are going shopping in Uckfield. John likes shopping. Janet says, "Hurry up, John. We'll miss the bus." She's having trouble with her teeth, isn't she?
I should never have slapped her quite so hard.
I'll have to wait another half hour. John says, "I'm just waiting for my beard straighteners to warm up." Janet says, "If you're not ready in 1 minute, there'll be no red currant jelly for you for a month." Ooh. Do you like red currant jelly? John does. Janet puts on John's reins to stop him skipping all the way to the shop. When they arrive in Uckfield, Janet says, "You can either come with me to the shops or get a new bicycle lock and the library, or you can look around the shops on your own, as long as you promise that you will behave."
You've met her, haven't you?
I'm underplaying. "I will," says John. Janet says, "See you back at the bus stop in an hour." See John wave goodbye to Janet and hop and skip gaily down the high street.
You said you wouldn't do that.
There are lots of shops in the high street, but not very many that sell bright clothes, toys, or sweets. So John looks at the windows of some of the other shops. And while John is looking at the shops, he sees Mrs. Bickerdike. "Hey up, fluffy whiskers." Mrs. Bickerdike is from Yorkshire. See the dark satanic mills. Mrs. Bickerdike says, "If you've now, John, Mrs. Fletcher in the estate agent could do with a hand. She's got 2 out sick and the shop is full of people."
That's quite scary, that is.
And John says, "I'm only window shopping anyway, so I'd be happy to help." Kind John. John waves goodbye to Mrs. Bickerdike, skips over to the estate agent. Ding-a-ling goes the door. You'd think we'd have somebody with a little bell or something, wouldn't you? Oh.
It's Noddy.
There are lots of people queuing to see Mrs. Fletcher, and the phone is ringing. And John says to Mrs. Fletcher, "Mrs. Bickerdike said you could do with a hand, so I've come to help you." "Thank you," says Mrs. Fletcher. See John answer the phone, take down some messages, then make Mrs. Fletcher a cup of tea. Soon, all of the people are gone, and Mrs. Fletcher is able to have a little rest. John says, "Is there anything else I can do?" Mrs. Fletcher says, "You could put up these house details in the window. It's a bit of a stretch for me." "Of course," says John. See how tall John is. When John is pinning up the house details on the board in the window, he sees Melanie Frontage outside. Melanie Frontage has a shop with black windows and sells special things for married people. Melanie Frontage comes into the shop. "Hello, Johnny," says Melanie Frontage. "I didn't know you worked here." And John says, "I'm just helping out. Mrs. Fletcher is very busy." Melanie says, "Well, I'd like some more information about that house you just put in the window. It looks ideal for my niece, but it might be a bit small. Perhaps she could see if it could have an extension." John says, "Yes, the semi-detached one. I'll have Mrs. Fletcher speak to you about it." Soon it's time for John to meet Janet. Mrs. Fletcher gives John £10 for helping her out. See John skip back down the road to the bus stop, swinging his sparkly handbag. And when Janet arrives, John said, "Hello, Janet." Janet said, "You're a good boy." "Yes, I saw Mrs. Bickerdike. She told me that if I was interested and had nothing on, Mrs. Fletcher was a bit desperate. So I popped along to help her out. I had to wait for the queue to die down before I could get her to put her feet up for 10 minutes. She was so grateful and gave me £10. Then I saw Melanie Frontage. She could see I had a nice semi on in the window. And was very interested to see if it could be extended." See Janet get out her new D-ring bicycle lock. See Janet lock John's neck to the bus stop and storm off down the road. Oh
dear.
Poor John.